All right, friends, welcome to the 2020 Day of Canvas webinar training. We have 10 amazing participants here and we're expecting some more. As folks come in, they can let us know they can hear us in the chat box. We're doing this on Zoom conferencing tonight, so you can chat with us, but you should not be able to see me. My name is Sailor Jones. I work for Democracy North Carolina, and we're almost ready to get started. Let us know you can hear us in the chat box. The chat box should be either the top or the bottom of your screen. It's so thrilling to have you here, Charlotte, Sarah, Adrian, May, Diana, Sunny, and the great Allison Riggs. It's going to be a fun night. I see we have 14 people here now. People are rolling in. It's amazing. Sound is good. Great to be here. Yay, Katrina. Thanks, Monique. All right, we're about to get started and we are rolling. So just know that if you want a recording of the 2020 Day of Canvas webinar training, it will come to you live and in person immediately after this show. All righty, Allison, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, friends. So you are here for the 2020 Day of Canvas webinar training. It's an exciting time to be able to get together virtually and not in person. I know a lot of you are afraid of the coronavirus, and this is a fun way to reach out and touch you and train you on what the Day of Canvas is, when it is, and your impact on elections by attending. We're here tonight. I hope you can see the slides. I'll be your host, Sailor Jones. I work for Democracy North Carolina as the campaigns director. It's a very exciting time, 2020. You can see my email there if you have questions, and I'll of course send you these slides as well so you can keep it forever. But the more important person we have here tonight is your expert, and oh, is she one. It's Allison Riggs, who is the interim executive director, the new interim executive director and chief counsel for voting rights at the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. She has been with SCSJ since 2009, which is a lot in political years. That's like 50 years in politics. But we love having Allison with us because she is truly an expert. She's fought for voting rights and redistricting in the toughest states, Texas, Florida, Virginia, and the great state of North Carolina, and has argued in front of the Supreme Court to fight against gerrymandering and for voters like you. It is an absolute honor to have you with us tonight, Allison Riggs.
Thank you, Sailor.
So we're going to get started tonight with all that you need to know about Canvas monitoring. And before I throw it over to Allison Riggs, I just want you to know it's not just us talking at you tonight. We do have a chat box open. We have a Q&A at the top or either the bottom of your screen where you can ask questions. And this is Zoom. It's a web conferencing apparatus so that we don't have to be in person. No touching of hands, no touching of faces. No need for Purell. You can actually just type into the chat box and ask questions as you have them throughout. I'll be working through the slides as Allison's talking and also answering your questions. And if I can't answer your questions, we will answer them together in a Q&A at the conclusion of today's webinar. So if you can hear me, great. If you're having trouble hearing me, you can dial out of the webinar and use the handy dandy phone number that was sent to you in the email to call in. And just know we will send you a recording of this video at the conclusion of the webinar. So with that, let's get this thing started. I want to turn it over to Allison Riggs, who is our resident expert at the Day of Canvas. I've been with Allison at a Day of Canvas. It's exhilarating. We were in Robeson County. It was a lot of fun. So Allison, can you start by telling us what the Day of Canvas actually is?
Absolutely. It's one of the most misunderstood, not well-known aspects of election administration, and also one of the most frequently misspelled words in election administration. It's canvas with two S's at the end, not one, like the stuff you paint on. Clearly, that's very important. Anyway, a lot of us may think that we vote on election day, we hear the results reported on the news. If we're really scrupulous, we wait until the actual report, the election results come out from the State Board of Elections and aren't based on exit polls. But really what needs to happen under North Carolina law is an additional meeting, official meeting of the county boards, then the state boards, called a canvass. And during the canvass, the County Board of Elections determines the final vote count and authenticates the election results. Determining the final vote count involves making decisions about absentee ballots and provisional ballots. The process of counting absentee ballots, the absentee ballots come in envelopes, and the county boards start looking at those and working through them. But all of that is finished by the canvass. And at canvass, the County Board of Elections, the appointed 5 members will make a decision on whether to count provisional ballots or not. This is an event that happens, I think that's good for, that's it. When is it? That's right. I want to give you a heads up, particularly in some of the big counties, there is a statutory day of canvass, date on which this happens. It's the 10th day after the election, and the statutes even prescribe the actual time. But it's folly to rely on statutes alone, particularly in big counties when you're talking about potentially thousands of provisional ballots and thousands of absentee ballots. It's not realistic. And I don't mean there's anything suspect about it. It's just not realistic that they can get all of that done in one day. So some of the county boards will have preliminary meetings, pre-canvass meetings. They are public meetings and are supposed to be noticed, but depending on what county you get deployed to or what county you choose to monitor canvass in, you'll want to check the County Board of Elections website and maybe even give a call down there to see what's already happened, and if there's any preliminary canvass meetings where you want to be. And this is the website where you can find that contact information to get those details. Again, don't immediately think there's anything suspicious about there being a pre-canvass meeting. Sometimes that can help canvass be a little bit more orderly and quite frankly a little easier to monitor.
And Allison, I just want to break in here. For example, just as Allison said, in Wake County, we just got notice from the director there that the day of canvass would begin on the 12th. And that it would start at 10 a.m. and there'd be, kind of a day-long look at the different ballots we're going to talk about, and that it would conclude on March 13th, Friday the 13th, the auspicious day where we're deploying people. So great example is Wake County.
Okay, so what to expect. These canvass meetings can vary pretty wildly from county to county in what to expect. Most frequently, these are held at the County Board of Elections office, but sometimes, especially with public notice and unanimous vote of the board, the canvass may be held in another spot. So historically, the Wake County Board of Elections has held its canvass meetings in this big warehouse they have in just sort of north of where Capitol and Wade Avenue intersect. But what you can expect walking in, sort of regardless of the setting, whether it's a Board of Elections office or a big, rambling storage center, is the 5 county board members sitting up front, sort of like a panel of deciders. And then county board staff will be there. And frequently these are, sorry, my dog is here. These are frequently folks who are very involved in the process. So for example, the county board director likely will make recommendations to the county board members. So those are the appointed members who get to make the decisions. But the county board director may say, board members, we recommend, we've batched these provisional ballots based on why they were cast as a provisional ballot, and we've done research on all of them, and we recommend this batch A, be approved, or this batch B will be partially approved in this manner. So it's not abnormal, and in fact it's expected that the County Board of Elections director, and in big counties, even more staff will be very involved in the process. But it's ultimately those political appointees that are making the decisions. There will also be potentially, depending on the county, members of the press there. I don't expect that a lot in the primary, but in the general elections, we see tons of press there. There'll be folks from the party. You may not, from both parties, from any parties, actually. We have more than 2 parties in North Carolina. They may be, sorry. They may be there observing, monitoring for their candidates, and doing all kinds of stuff like that. So they won't be necessarily wearing name tags. You may not know exactly what they're there for, but it tends to be a well-attended event. So expect to, which isn't to say you need to get there 2 hours early, but in some of these counties, it can be a little bit hard to hear the folks at the front. So I see some other dog is also participating in Candace training and probably really happy about it. There are, these are not spaces that are necessarily well mic'd. So I would recommend getting there early and getting up close so you can hear any discussion. Next slide. These are public meetings. So it's really only been, the partisan folks have been involved in Canvas for a while. I think our efforts to really build out the nonprofit, nonpartisan groups monitoring and engaged in Canvas has been more recent. And in some of these counties, nobody shows up for Canvas. So which isn't to say you should expect resistance, but you may, especially in smaller counties, have county board staff surprised to see you. I think they will be happy to see you, but don't be thrown if they are surprised. And you are entitled to attend, and you're entitled to be able to hear what people are saying. Next slide. So biggest thing we want you to take away is don't be intimidated. Because this is a public meeting, because you have a right to be there and observe what is being said, you have the right to say, I can't hear, can folks speak up? Try not to be disruptive. Sometimes it's easier to sort of step over and speak to staff and say, I can't hear county board member X, he or she is speaking very softly. It's hard for me to hear. Likewise, and sometimes I've found this easier to do at the beginning, is approach staff. Staff will probably be the folks looking the most busy, right? No disparagement intended towards the appointed members, but the staff are the ones who are getting everything ready for the members to vote on. So if you see someone sort of bustling about, good chance that's a staff member. It's often easiest for you to say ahead of time before the canvas even begins. So yet another reason to get there a little early. Can we ask a question if we can't understand what's being said? Can we ask a question if there hasn't been an explanation for a decision that's being made, that kind of thing. So ask ahead of time, if at all possible, to avoid disrupting the proceedings. But we want to make sure that you're able to take good notes and report back information. This is really, doing this now is critical work, and we really have to view this as a learning opportunity for the general election when who knows what could be happening. So taking lots of notes. Everyone has a different note style, and again, I'll be annoying and repetitive. If you get there early, you can introduce yourself to the board members. Some counties have Board of Election member pictures on their website. I would say that's not standard, but you might go to your County Board of Election website just to check beforehand, because if there are pictures, then you'll know who's talking. But if you get there early while folks are setting up, it'll be easy enough to say, hi, I'll use Wake County. Hi, Gary Sims. My name is Allison Riggs, and thank you for conducting this canvas. I'm happy to be here, and I just wanted to introduce myself. Likewise, the board members, there'll be 5 of them. You can introduce yourself and be friendly and just sort of get names, right? Because if you know who's talking, it makes for better notes, and we can figure out who are the folks we need to be paying attention to and watching as decisions are being made. So I see some questions. Maybe we should address those as we are going.
Absolutely. So Diana was asking if she and the other Canvas monitors should wear our yellow Democracy and See Vote Protector t-shirts. Obviously, those yellow t-shirts are the ones we wear during election protection. What do you think, Allison?
I think it's a great idea. The yellow shirts are respected. They've become famous across the state, and I think they are really respected by election poll workers, which may not be the folks obviously who are in the room that day, but we're really proud of the work that you do. And I think the fact that you're there in a nonpartisan basis for good government, for transparency, to increase participation in the overall political process, I would highly recommend.
Awesome. Thanks, Diana.
Okay, so what to do? As I mentioned, because of the numbers, the provisional ballots might be discussed in batch or category. So they may say, this would be a common way of breaking down. Gary Sims might say to the Wake County Board of Elections, board members, we have 1,200 out of precinct provisional ballots. My staff has reviewed those 1,200 out of precinct provisional ballots and determined that 800 of them can be counted in full and 4 of them can be counted in part. Meaning, I went to my incorrect polling place on election day, and I was eligible to vote in the primary, on the presidential item, the Senate item, the countywide races, but on some of the district specific races, I wasn't able to vote for because they didn't have my right ballot style, because I wasn't in the right precinct. So that's why, generally speaking, and usually the director will be explaining why certain categories are being recommended for not being counted. Likewise, there may be a bucket or a batch of no record of registration. Likely they will say, there were 1,000 provisional ballots. I'm making these numbers up. There were 1,000 provisional ballots for no record of registration. 200 of them indicated that they registered at DMV. We did the DMV research on all of the provisional ballots, even the ones not checked off as, I think I'm not registered, even though I'm not registered, but I think I registered at the DMV. And we found that 150 of those voters had in fact registered at DMV, and we just didn't get the signature page transmitted from DMV. So we recommend those no record of registration provisional ballots be counted and the rest of them not. Jurisdiction dispute, you will see those. This is probably one of the more complicated ones. It has to do with what's called geocoding and how voters are mapped into their districts. And sometimes a voter, because of the map records, will get a ballot for, so for example, part of the city of Durham is actually in Wake County and part of it's in Durham County, and that can create some confusion with computers. Clearly I'm a technical expert here. that can create some confusion, and sometimes a person can get the wrong ballot style. These numbers will pale compared to the out of precinct or no record of registration. And really, we just need to get the overall, if we can get the overall numbers, so overall number of out of precincts, the overall number of those recommended to be counted in full, overall number of those recommended to be counted in part, overall recommended not counted at all. As many numbers as you can get us, that helps us. Now, this isn't an advocacy interaction at this point, right? They're proceeding according to the statute, and it's the director usually and the board members communicating with each other. There's not a mechanism for you to say, well, wait a second, I don't like that you are discounting 1,000 ballots for no record of registration. What we can do is figure out what the number is, and if there's some advocacy that can be done, we can do it before the state board canvasses. So what we really need is data, and that's what you guys are invaluable to us to get, is that data.
And Allison, we just got a question from Adrienne Kelly, who I happen to work with. She's asking about if laptops are allowed, or is it better to take notes on paper, and if there's any preference. And I just want to forward quickly to the next slide, letting people know that, you know, as Allison said, we want you to take lots of notes. And the easiest way to do that is often online or on a computer. So obviously computers are allowed. I think when Alice and I were in Robeson County in 2016, the 3 people doing Canvas monitoring that day, we all had our laptops out and were typing feverishly everything that was said. And to that end, this time, well, while we had paper forms in 2016, we are now in 2020. And while we do not have flying cars, what we do have is an online report form. And you can find that report form, which is harder to say than I even imagine, at demnc.co/canvas report. This is an online form. We turned the print form that we had in 2016 into an online form, so you could just fill in the blanks. It's also at our Canvas monitoring hub, which is demnc.co/canvas. And we'll send you all of these links after the show. But in terms of my preference, and I would imagine Allison would agree, receiving things online and via computer makes it easier for us to read and to get that information more quickly. But I'll turn it back over to Allison.
100% seconded. It's been a long Monday.
Agree.
But I will also say this: not every site where you'll be monitoring may have a convenient plug. Mm-hmm. So make sure your computer is fully charged, or has as much juice in it as it can handle beforehand. You may be able to move around. I mean, and you can move around, you know, during the Canvas as quietly as possible. And so you can try and relocate if you do need a charger, and there is a charger. But planning to, you know, have your computer fully charged and ready to go may enable you to sit up close up front and not strain to hear people talking. I see a great question on the sidebar.
And we're about to get to provisionals too, so I'm going to flip to that next slide.
Perfect.
If I can. All right. So Diana asks, and this is a great question. We had a precinct that ran out of, it says damn ballots, but I bet it's Democratic. All of those damn ballots ran out midday and had to obtain more. I would imagine those were in Forsyth, but maybe not. The polling place stayed open later, but would they have given provisionals for those ballots that had run out?
Yes. So there were 2 precincts in the state that had extended voting hours, and by statute, if the state board votes to extend voting hours, those ballots are cast as provisional ballots, so that if there's some dispute about whether they should be counted later or not, they're easily accessible. There's been no such dispute. So in those 2 precincts only, so you'll only hear this in Bertie County and Forsyth County. Those should be bucketed, for lack of a better word, as a separate category, and they should just be recommended to be counted in whole. But I would love to hear how many of them are in that bucket. So that's a note you can take. Awesome. All right, so that answers that question. And then, so provisionals. As folks hopefully know, the photo ID requirement that the legislature passed in December of 2018 was blocked by both state and federal courts for the 2020 primary. But that doesn't mean we that some voters wouldn't be asked to show IDs. There's a federal law that was passed after the 2000 election called the Help America Vote Act, which it was a piece of compromise legislation from Congress, as many are. It was in part designed to make sure that voters had access to provisional ballots. In 2000, I lived in Florida in the year 2000 and know that it was a hot mess, and it was a problem making sure that voters got access to provisional ballots in other states as well. So HAVA was intended to address that, but as part of the compromise and give more money for states to update their elections infrastructure. But as part of the compromise around that bill, it was agreed that voters who registered by mail, that is sent in a form received by the county board. It could also be delivered by hand, but not in person is the key point. By voters who filled out a form and sent it in some way or another and didn't provide the last four of their social or their driver's license number, or those numbers couldn't be read or verified, that those voters would be asked to show some form of non-photo ID. And so we call that a HAVA document now, or HAVA ID. So, you know, we do see, when we're doing election protection work, we see some confusion about voters saying, well, I thought we didn't have an ID requirement. We don't have a photo ID requirement. A small number of voters, depending on how they registered, would have been asked to show a HAVA document. But a HAVA document included any government document, utility bill, bank statement. It didn't have to be a picture ID. So sometimes what happens is a voter who registered that way and who hadn't voted yet before would show up on election day without one of those HAVA documents. Those voters would cast a provisional ballot, but they should have been instructed on how to what's called cure their provisional ballot. That means ensure their provisional ballot gets counted by coming to the County Board of Elections and bringing the HAVA document, even though they didn't have it on election day. So these numbers tend to be small, but present, particularly in the more populous counties. So it is helpful for you to document the number of HAVA ID related provisionals and whether they've been cured and thus counted or not.
And Allison, I just want to say, in addition to, we're going to talk a little bit about no record of registration problems. And I see the DMV listed here a lot, but we've received a lot of questions outside of this webinar about people who have been removed from the rolls because of the biennial removal process. So I'm hoping, in addition to the DMV, we can talk a little bit about that as well.
Absolutely. I will hit that right after the DMV. So probably one of the biggest categories of provisional ballots you'll see on the day of canvass is those characterized as no record of registration, meaning the voter went in to vote, and when the person at the check-in desk looked up their name, they couldn't find that person. So I go in, I say, my name is Allison Riggs, I live at 123 Main Street, and the poll worker's looking through their book or their e-poll book, and they're like, I don't see you anywhere, you're not registered. At which point I'd be sent over to the help desk to try and problem solve that, and likely would end up casting a provisional ballot. It is not unexpected that a lot of those may end up being not counted. You know, as much as we try and continue to do voter education, not everyone realizes that they have to register to vote. And not everyone realizes that a registration in Wake County doesn't just transfer to Durham County. That is, every county sort of conducts its election separately. And if you move from Wake County to Durham County, you have to re-register in Durham County. You can't just go on the day of the election and update your address. You can update your address within the county on election day, but you can't do it trans-county. So that's the most common reason we'll see a lot of these no record of registration provisional ballots not counted. It's expected. I wish we had election day registration. We're we'll advocate for it. And some states do have it, meaning you would never have a no record of registration provisional ballot because you could register on election day. But we don't have it now, and so we have to deal with the fact that if we haven't done our work getting folks either registered ahead of time or turned out to early voting when they can access same-day registration, we will have some number of voters who whose votes don't count because of no record of registration. The good news is those provisional ballots then act as registration forms, so those voters will be registered to vote going forward. When a voter, so I just gave you the hypothetical, I go in, I went to the check-in desk, the poll worker there said, Allison, you're not on the voter rolls. You better go over to the help desk and see if they can figure it out. They may check another set of poll books over at the help desk and they say, Allison, you are not registered to vote in Wake County. I'm sorry. So they will give me a form. It's really an envelope, but a yellow form and an envelope to fill out about why, did I think I was registered and I'm not? Did I think I registered at DMV? Am I registered in a different county? Lots of different choices. But one of the most important reasons you can give is that I registered when I went and got my driver's license, or when I went and updated my driver's license after I moved from Wake County to Durham County, I told DMV I want to update my registration. I did it on this date. Look, my driver's license says I went there on this date. DMV conveys registrations electronically, and they convey the written part of the registration separate from the signature part because they keep them in separate files. We've made a lot of progress in the last few years improving those transmission processes, but for a while there was a real problem with the data getting transferred but not the signature, and so the registrations couldn't be complete. And so we were seeing a fair number of people who said they registered at DMV not showing up on the rolls and thus having to vote provisional ballots. So we worked with Democracy North Carolina actually in a lawsuit to address that issue. And we've gotten a good result. But one of the things that counties do is the yellow form is for DMV folks who say I registered at DMV. We want to know how many of those yellow slips got sent out. Most counties, though, are instructed to do DMV research on all no record of registration provisional ballots. It's an automated process. They send a list of names to DMV and DMV sends a report back. But we want to know, how many, if there are any yellow forms, how many. We want to know how many are provisionals, no record of registration provisionals are DMV issues. And we want to hear if what the board says about this. They'll call it DMV research. And we want to hear as many details as you can gather on that, what the board says about that. The other issue that Saylor raised was that some folks may have gone in on election day believing that they were registered to vote, only they weren't, and they haven't been to DMV in a long time. They got their driver's license, 10 years ago. So that's not the issue. It wasn't that it was a DMV problem, but they don't know why they were removed, or they don't know why they aren't on the rolls. Well, what the County Board of Elections can do and should be doing on those voters is saying we hope that there were 1,000 voters, no record of registration. 100 of those voters we noticed were removed pursuant to what's called biennial list maintenance. It's required under federal law that after every federal election cycle, there's some effort made to update the rolls and take people off who county boards of elections believe no longer live in the jurisdiction anymore. And that's frequently identified by people who haven't participated in a long time. We believe that voting shouldn't be a use it or lose it, or vote registration shouldn't be a use it or lose it right, but The Supreme Court hasn't agreed with us yet on that front, but we want to hear, there was a substantial list maintenance, there was substantial list maintenance activity in January of 2019. That's when it happens after a federal election. It happens in January after that, November, and there was a substantial one in January of 2019, and we're still analyzing the data on who was removed pursuant to that list maintenance effort. But we're very interested in hearing what the county boards are saying, if anything. And it may be that they don't say anything. It's not necessarily a violation of the law, but if they do say anything, you know, it's very interesting to us to know that. And you know, you can't interrupt the proceedings to ask, but if you hang around afterwards, if they don't bring it up, you might you know, go over to the county director or a county board member and say, do you know how many of those no record of registrations were listed as removed because of list maintenance activities? They may not know, but it's worth asking. You can jot it down in your notes to us, and it might save us some research and calls. All right, so that takes provisionals. That goes through provisionals. Absentee ballots. So the board will discuss in detail how many absentee ballots they got, and they'll probably first start talking about absentee ballots that they got on time versus the ones that they received late. That always happens. There will be some folks who don't get their absentee ballots in the mail in time. They didn't get them postmarked. They didn't realize what the deadline was, and there's a statutory limit on that. I mean, if they're not received, postmarked and or received by the statutory deadline, they're not allowed to be counted. So that'll be the first thing likely that the county will address. The next thing may be the number of absentee ballots that are deficient in some ways. So as of a few years ago, we now, if you're submitting an absentee ballot, you have to have 2 signatures, 2 witnesses, that is, on your absentee ballot. And that can be a reason why an absentee ballot is rejected. In some counties, especially the ones that are more staffed, if the county receives an absentee ballot early and opens the envelope to put them in the stack to be counted and notices there's a missing signature, they'll call the voter and say, hey, you submitted an absentee ballot, but you didn't sign it. You've got to sign it. And so that it's not required by law. It's a nice thing that some counties do if they have the staff to do it. But that may be, you may hear something about that. We had, you know, 10 deficient absentee ballots that were cured because we did some outreach, but it's the exception, not the rule. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if an absentee ballot lacks the voter signature or only has 1 witness instead of 2 witnesses, it can have 1 witness if the witness is a notary, but if it lacks those witnesses and signature, the ballot has to be rejected under state law. So we want to know about those numbers as well to track patterns and problems. So we are aware that in some counties, some groups that don't like same-day registration sent out mailings, particularly early in the voting period, to voters who used same-day registration. And these mailings said, hi, Allison, I see you used same-day registration. I want to see the reason, I wanted to know the reasons why. And needless to say, you know, I don't believe that they actually want to know the reasons why, but there may be some discussion about whether those groups are involved in presenting to the county board whether or not some of those mailings might have been returned as undeliverable, not because the voter doesn't live there, but sometimes the U.S. Postal Service messes up. Or maybe the voter lived there on election day and has moved since then. Sometimes mail bounces back. Occasionally a same-day registration application. I've seen instances where the same-day registration application, the poll worker, fills it out and doesn't list the apartment number. And so a mailing that gets sent to that address can bounce back. Whether or not this is from a party that hates same-day registration, or it's part of just the county board of election mailing the voter their registration card after they've used same-day registration, if there's any discussion of mailings being sent to same-day registration voters and those mailings being returned, we want to know about it. We also want to know if there were any SDR voters who were challenged or denied, and if so, how many. Now, we're not saying that's a fight you need to have, but there are statutory regulations for how an absentee ballot can be challenged, and a same-day registration ballot is an absentee ballot. So we don't need you to fight that fight at that moment, but we need to know that data and know those numbers, and if there's a reason, so that we can fight that before the state board's canvass. Machine or software issues. So there's a lot of different equipment used in election administration, and it varies from county to county. A lot of counties use electronic poll books rather than e-poll books to help streamline and make quicker the check-in, so you don't have to flip through 3,000 pages of voters. You can just type their name into the computer and look them up. Sometimes there can be, just like with any computers or any machines, there can be some issues with the e-poll books. If there are, we want to know about it. That's one of the machines we're talking about when we're talking about equipment or machines involved in voting. Likewise, when you get your authorization to vote form, you take it and you take it over to the ballot table, and hopefully the person working in the ballot table scanned your authorization to vote form with a little hand scanner like they have at Costco for your bulky items, scanned your authorization to vote form, and then scanned your ballot to make sure they were giving you the right ballot style. Sometimes there's problems with those scanners. Some counties use ballot marking devices. Well, all counties have ballot marking devices for ADA compliance, for voters who may have physical or visual challenges that prohibit them from marking a ballot. There has to be some machinery to help those voters. Some counties use those machines exclusively, and some have them only like one or two towards the side for ADA voters. There can be issues, just like with any machinery, there could be issues with those, and if those are discussed in your county board of elections, we want to know about it. A lot of counties that use those machines bought new machines this year, and we'd be interested in any discussion about how those machines worked. We didn't, we have some sense of that from calls into the hotline, but I'd be interested in hearing how the boards discuss that. And then, oh wait, I'm not done yet, go back. Regardless of whether there's a ballot marking device or you're an optical scan county, that is, you bubbled in a dot or colored in a block next to a candidate's name, you still get a paper ballot, or you have a paper ballot, and you have to put it in something. It's called a tabulator. That's another machine or software. And tabulators can be a little persnickety sometimes. In Wake County, weirdly enough, we've noticed that when it's really humid, the tabulators tend to quit. And there's a special slot and a special procedure. You put the ballot into the slot beneath the tabulator or in some other kind of secure receptacle if the tabulator goes down temporarily, and they generally fix it really quickly. But we want to know if there's any discussion of tabulator problems as well. So I think I've covered all of the different machines and equipment used in voting, and we want to know what they talk about. There are statutory procedures for challenges to voters. Those are called voter challenges. There's also procedures called election protests, and there's deadlines for both of those. We want to know if there was reported a hearing in which a voter was questioned about their eligibility to vote. That can happen at a polling place, and the chief judge at the polling place ends up having to make a call right then and there. And it can happen before election day. But we want to hear about that, if there's any discussion, and what happened, if we can figure it out. If there's some sort of staff or a board member alludes to a previous challenge or alludes to a challenge on election day, but doesn't tell you what happened, just make a note to yourself and maybe grab someone afterwards and say, I heard you mention a challenge in precinct Y. How was that resolved? What happened? We're not aware, we're tracking, but if there are any election protests, we'd probably give you a heads up based on what county you're being deployed to, but those are conducted pursuant to a separate statute, and there's a whole different process for that. If that happens, we'll want to hear about that too.
So friend, we've gotten to the most fun part of the night, which is talking about the report form. I just want to emphasize that we do have the report form online even now. You can take a look at it at this short link, which you'll receive after the webinar. Right now, we've converted the paper form, which included 10 entries to discuss uncounted provisionals that you hear about. It had 3 entries for the voter challenges that Allison just talked about. And you can also feel free to use additional paper, use email, the body of an email, and send it to us, or you can scan your email, your paper files, and send them via email to us as well. Again, the more the better, and the more Canvas monitors, the merrier, and more is more in the case of Canvas monitoring. Take lots of notes and do it how you like. But we've provided this online Canvas report form to make it a little bit easier to type in real time what you're seeing, and also send it to us more quickly. Obviously, the state board's Canvas is happening on the 20th. If we receive a lot of things online and through the report form, we can take a look at it almost immediately ahead of that Canvas. So just wanted to mention that as well. And Allison, do you have anything about the report form that you want to share? I know more is more when it comes to taking notes.
More is more, but I think that, the most helpful thing to us would be identifying I'm not discounting any of it, it's all important, but identifying the speakers, super critical, and getting those numbers for us, also super critical.
Awesome. Thank you for saying that. And so speakers and numbers is something we'll emphasize after the webinar. We'll put that in the email to you. And speaking of email, these are our emails. I know Allison's is very long, but it's worth it. So if you have questions for us or want to email us information beyond the report form, obviously we'll forward everything in the report form to Southern Coalition, and we'll have it here at Democracy. But after this, you'll have these slides with our email addresses, if in case you need to contact us between now and the day of Canvas or after the day of Canvas. And I just wanted to let you know, some of you have signed up to do Canvas monitoring. You don't yet have an assignment. You've let us know you want to travel. You let us know which region of the state you'd like to go to. Over the next 3 days, which is how long we have before Friday the 13th Canvas, we will definitely reach out and touch you via email and via phone. I will contact you directly and let you know what counties we're targeting, because they have a high propensity for these types of ballots that Allison talked about, and let you know where they are, where we would prefer to have you if you are willing to travel. If you've already selected your county, or you live in a county where you want to Canvas monitor, that is great too. The more the merrier. At this point, we have about 15 counties we're targeting, and about 5 more where people have said they want to stay closer to home and monitor there. Again, we'll have a diversity of counties to monitor and a good look at the problems that many counties are facing. So I wanted to mention that email. And the last thing I want to tag team with Allison really quickly is just how important this program is. I can't emphasize it enough. Before I came to Democracy NC, I had never heard of the Day of Canvass, but it's pretty darn important. And I know Allison has some things to say about that.
In particular, the 2016 general election, there were close elections, and folks who were not interested in protecting the names and reputations of voters and whose only interest was in creating electoral havoc used the canvass period to cast doubt on the outcome of the election. And we are worried about that happening again in this general election. This is your chance to get familiar with the canvass process so that you can be incredibly effective next time. I mean, every time is a learning experience. When I went to my first canvass meeting, I was just soaking it in. What's happening, and you know, especially after I'd done a few different counties too, I got to see the variability between counties. But once you get one or two under your belt, you know what to look for, you know what to focus in on. We have to be prepared for the worst in November. I hope to goodness gracious it doesn't come to bear, but you volunteering to do this now during the primary is getting us ready to deal with any contingency that we need to deal with in November and ensure that our votes are respected, our voters are respected, that voters aren't intimidated, and we have elections conducted and certified in a way that citizens can trust. Our democracy depends on you watching and monitoring these canvass meetings. No, not to be dramatic or anything.
No, it's not dramatic at all. And I've even written down, you know, Allison was talking about things like election day registration or the way that there are deficiencies, how many deficiencies there can be under the new absentee voting law. These are big problems and problems that Allison works every day to correct and to advocate for better election policies. You are the one, much like election protection work that we do together, SESJ and Democracy NC, and all of you. This is providing the evidence that we all need to advocate for better voting practices and more access going into the general election, not less. So it's so incredibly important. And as a result of that, we have put everything that you could possibly need all in one place. If you go to demnc.co/canvas, even now you can find the interest form. If you have not told us where you want to canvass, you can let us know in that interest form. We'll try to keep you close to home. If you request to be close to home, we'll put you anywhere in the state. If you want to go anywhere in the state, we have a few people who are traveling on Friday the 13th to go to particularly important counties, and we appreciate you. So everything you need is there. The recording of this webinar will be there. The slides from this webinar, just give me a little bit of time and I'll post both of those things there now. But even now we have a cheat sheet that includes a lot of what Allison was talking to you about. You can look it up, download it, print it out, take it to the day of Canvass as a reference. That would be an easy way to get what you need and document it in the online report form on the day of. So we're not even relying on you to remember any of this. We know it's Monday night. We know it's late, but we would love to have your help, and everything you need is right there. Again, if you have signed up through this registration form or through the interest form, I'll be in touch with you over the next 3 days to make sure you are connected to your county and that you're feeling good about getting to the day of Canvass, normally at 11 a.m. on March 13th, but it may be in the days before, so we can help you with that. And we can give you information about how to check where the Board of Elections meeting is, make sure it starts on time, and it's where you think it is. So all of that can be there if you sign up now, download the cheat sheet, you'll find the recording and slides there later. And I just want to open it up, Allison, if you're willing. We've got a few minutes left. If anyone has any remaining questions, please type them into the chat box and we'll take care of them, or the Q&A box. We can do that too, but if you have any remaining questions, you can do it there. Allison, do you have any last thoughts for our Canvas monitors? We have a couple of dozen people who have signed up to do this intrepid work during the 2020 primary.
I'm grateful for you. In all likelihood, I'll even be at my computer when it's happening. There may be Wi-Fi in some of those spaces. I would venture to guess that would be the rare exception. But don't hesitate to email me. The shorter email, I have you can also email me at allison@stsj.org. That will also reach me. But it's worth shooting. I'll do my best to answer questions on the fly if you have that capacity. But we're really grateful for y'all doing this. I mean, election protection is more than just during early voting and on election day. This is just as critical to a really fulsome election protection program, and I'm really grateful.
Well, Allison, we're really grateful for all the work that you do for us every single day. We hope to send you right back to the Supreme Court with everything that we learn on Friday. But until then, friends, I'll be in touch via email. And we've got one question, I think, from Charlotte. I don't know if I can get out of work on Friday, but I can plan to be available for Canvas monitoring following the general if that would be needed. Absolutely, Charlotte. This is a pilot program during the primary, which is not easy to say. But that's what we're doing here, just starting the conversation, getting people trained. The first step was coming to this great training tonight with Allison, and you have exactly what you need to help us out in the primary and the general, and we're so grateful for you tonight, Charlotte. So with that, I'm going to bid Allison adieu. Allison Riggs, thank you so much for being here tonight. And everybody, it was
Sailor, everyone give Sailor a round of applause, even though we can't hear you.
Yay.
Awesome job gathering us all together and doing this great leading this great effort. We appreciate you.
Thanks, friend. All right, everybody, I'll stop the share right now, but you'll have a recording in your inboxes so soon. Thank you for being here, and have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.